I always knew I wouldn't go out quietly. It's strange, isn't it? How the people who ignore you your whole life suddenly remember your existence when there's money involved. I didn't have much, at least not to their eyes. To them, I was the black sheep. The weird one, the burden. The one they whispered about at Christmas dinners, smiling with those polite fake grins, while I sat at the edge of the room pretending. I couldn't hear them, but I heard everything. And I remembered. When I got sick, I didn't tell anyone at first. What was the point? The phone that never rang wasn't going to suddenly start lighting up, just because I had a diagnosis. Cancer doesn't magically make people love you. If anything, it makes them more awkward, more distant. I learned that early. I had enough saved to scrape by, to pay rent, get food, keep the lights on. But the treatments drained everything. By the time I sold off the last of my jewelry, I knew I wasn't going to win this one, but I wasn't going to let them win either. See, I have this thing about fairness. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe that's naive. But I believe that if life won't balance the scales, sometimes you have to do it yourself. So I wrote a letter, not just a letter. The letter took me 3 weeks to write. Between chemo sessions, and nights where the pain crawled up my spine like a wild animal. But I wrote it. I poured into it every moment they let me sit in the corner at family reunions. Every birthday they forgot. Every Christmas, they sent a card with no return address. Every cruel thing said behind my back that I pretended didn't shatter me. I didn't just name names. I told stories. You know that cousin of mine? The one who likes to pretend she's a saint on social media, always sharing inspirational quotes. She stole $2,000 from our grandmother when she was in hospice. No one knew. I knew. That uncle everyone loves at barbecues. Caught him cheating on his wife with her best friend at my 17th birthday party. The sister who blocked my number when I told her I was sick. She forgot I still had screenshots of all the hateful things she said about me to her friends. I printed the receipts, bound them, glossy covers, neat formatting, footnotes, appendices. I wasn't just going to go quietly into the dark. I was going to go published, and then I mailed it to every single family member, scheduled for delivery. On the day of my funeral, you should have seen their faces. I planned it well. The service was just somber enough to make them relax, make them lean into the comfort of their pretend grief. They probably imagined themselves going back home, sharing old stories about me to make themselves feel better. But then the mail arrived. You could hear the ripping of envelopes echoing across the cemetery lawn. It was almost musical. I died poor, alone, but I died honest. And for the first time in their lives, they had to sit in the same shame they tried to bury me under. My last breath wasn't soft. It was a scream written in ink, and I got the last word. After the funeral, the aftermath was more entertaining than I could have imagined. They tried to pretend the envelopes were just sympathy cards. But you could see the confusion on their faces as they read the first few lines. And then the color drained from their cheeks, replaced with the sort of white-hot panic usually reserved for criminals caught mid-act. Word spread fast. You'd think grief would keep people quiet, but shame has a way of making people talk louder. By the time the last shovel of dirt hit my casket, half of them were whispering, not prayers, but excuses. I had arranged it so that every sordid detail I revealed was backed up by evidence. Not just screenshots and photos, but notarized documents, printouts of online transactions, records, nothing flimsy. I knew the first thing they would do was accuse me of making things up. So I made sure every accusation was airtight. Spend a lifetime being the black sheep without learning how to gather receipts. And the best part? I had help. Turns out, being the family outcast isn't as lonely as you'd think. There are always others, like you quiet cousins, friends of friends, people who have nothing to gain but everything to say. When I started gathering stories, people came out of the woodwork. Anonymous letters slipped under my door. Emails from burners. Even my old neighbor sent me a folder of photographs she'd taken. Things she thought should probably be seen one day. One day was today, my cousin. Lisa's social media went dead within hours. Inspirational quotes don't land the same when someone's posting receipts of you emptying your dying grandmother's wallet. My uncle's barbecue invitations stopped arriving. Funny how family men lose their appeal when their betrayals are laid bare and glossy, bound print. My sister, oh my sister. She tried to play it cool at first, acted like she was above it, said I was jealous, angry, twisted by bitterness. But screenshots don't lie, and neither do times. Every lie she told about me, every cruel nickname, every plan to keep me cut off forever was right there in her own words. Ink on paper, permanent as shame. And when the mail arrived at her door with the binder titled "The Truth You Tried to Bury," she couldn't run from it anymore. It wasn't just revenge. It was exposure. And exposure is permanent. See, I didn't want money. They thought that's what I wanted. That's why they avoided me all those years. They thought I would beg. They thought I would be the sad story they'd tell at brunch. The distant relative who never quite made it. But I didn't want anything but truth. There's a kind of peace that comes with that. The money I did have, what little was left, I left 2 people who deserved it. The hospice nurse who sat with me at night when the pain made it hard to breathe, she got the biggest share. The neighbor who shoveled my walkway every winter for free, him too. Random acts of kindness, paid forward with the last drops of my existence. And my family, they got what they deserved. The beauty of writing your own ending is that you don't have to live to see the fallout. But I almost wish I could have almost. It's strange what people reveal about themselves when they think you're gone for good. You'd expect mourning, maybe regret. Instead, I watched my family implode from the grave. That my friend David, blessed him, set up a live stream. It wasn't flashy, just a simple fixed camera in the corner of the funeral reception hall. He labeled it "Celebrating Jane" so that anyone who clicked would expect soft music and gentle words. What they got was real-time footage of reputations crumbling. Within minutes of the binders being opened, the murmurs began. By the half-hour mark, the shouting started. And by the end of the afternoon, the family I once sat awkwardly apart from had fractured into a mosaic of accusations, broken alliances, and shattered lies. But I wasn't done. Before I died, I scheduled 1 more delivery mails, hundreds of them, to friends, acquaintances, old teachers, childhood neighbors, former coworkers, everyone tangentially connected to my life. Not petty gossip, just the truth, the facts, laid bare, about the people who spent their lives stepping on me to elevate themselves. I wasn't cruel. I didn't twist the knife. I just handed people the knife they'd been ignoring all along. My lawyer was in on it too. Turns out you can have a lot of fun with posthumous instructions if you're detailed enough. And I was very detailed. A clause in my will ensured that any attempt to sue, discredit, or spin the truth would trigger an automatic release of even more evidence. Backup drives, offsite storage, encrypted folders, entrusted to people who didn't share my last name. Checkmate. You'd think that was enough. But I had one last card to play. Remember that money they thought I didn't have? Turns out, been living frugally for a reason. Most of what I earned I funneled quietly into trusts, charities, funds for shelters and food banks. Every cent I could spare. But the piece de resistance was the scholarship. I named it after my grandmother. Not the grandmother Lisa robbed blind, the other one. The one who taught me how to read when no one else cared. The one who made me promise that I would never let this family's bitterness make me bitter. The Eleanor Grace Memorial Scholarship was funded with the entirety of my savings. It was set up for kids like me, kids from broken families. Kids who knew what it felt like to sit at the edge of a room full of people who pretended not to see you. It would pay full tuition for underprivileged students with academic promise and absolutely no family support. And here's the kicker. The scholarship board, comprised entirely of people outside my family. They couldn't touch it, couldn't benefit from it, couldn't spin it. I didn't want to die angry. I wanted to die right. And as that fund grew with every donation, because yes, once the emails went out, donations began pouring in from strangers who'd read my words and recognized the hunger for truth. I realized something. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the shepherd the whole time. They were just too blind to notice. They left me to die poor, alone, forgotten. But now, my name wasn't whispered anymore. It was spoken loudly, with respect, with truth, and their names. Footnotes in someone else's cautionary tale. I didn't haunt them with ghosts. I haunted them with honesty. And that's a legacy you can't erase. I thought that would be the end of it. But stories, like ghosts, rarely stay quiet when they're unfinished. And it turned out that my story wasn't just mine anymore. Once the binders were opened, once the emails landed, once the truth spread like wildfire across living rooms and inboxes, something strange started to happen. People started talking, just about me, but about them, about all of it. It started with a single blog post. Some woman I barely remembered from high school, quiet girl, used to sit behind me in English, wrote a long piece about it, about the cruelty of families, who only show up when there's something to take, about what it means to be erased while you're still breathing, about how the people closest to you can often be the ones who bury you before you're dead. Her post went viral. Then the think pieces started rolling in. Journalists reached out to David for interviews. Podcasts debated whether what I did was cruel or courageous. YouTubers with soft, melancholy background music dissected my story frame by frame like amateur detectives. Everyone suddenly had an opinion on the girl who exposed her family at her own funeral, but they didn't really know me, not yet. See, part of the plan buried deep in my notes and instructions wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. If they were going to tell my story, they were going to tell all of it, not just the family dirt, not just the petty betrayals, but the whole messy, complicated truth of who I was. So I wrote that too. It wasn't a diary or a confession, it was a memoir. Clean, sharp, unforgiving in some places, tender in others. Every humiliation, every betrayal, every kindness, every mistake. I wrote about the nights I cried on the kitchen floor. I wrote about the people who held out a hand when I was drowning. I wrote about the times I got it wrong, too, because I wasn't perfect. Never claimed to be. And when the time was right, David published it. I was the black sheep, a memoir. It didn't take long for it to climb the charts. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was true. People saw themselves in it, the lonely kids, the betrayed daughters, the cousins left behind, the sons no one called. They read their own reflections in my words, and suddenly, I wasn't the only one telling the story anymore. People wrote to David, thousands of them, letters, emails, drawings, little trinkets in the mail. Some just said thank you. Others told stories of their own heartbreaks and silent wars. It was as if, by burning my own life to the ground, I'd given everyone else permission to stop pretending everything was fine. Even some members of my own family started breaking away from the lies. Not all of them. Some were too far gone, too invested in the roles they'd assigned themselves. But a few cousins I barely knew reached out to David with apologies, not for what they'd done, but for what they hadn't spoken up, stepped in, cared sooner. It was strange watching from beyond the veil as my life unraveled, but also reassembled itself, not in the way I would have done it, but in something new, something better. And then came the letters to the scholarship fund. Teachers wrote to say how the Eleanor Grace Memorial Scholarship was going to change lives. Parents of kids struggling to pay for books and fees sent shaky-voiced recordings, unable to finish their sentences without breaking into tears. One letter came from a student in the foster system, barely old enough to drive, saying simply, "I don't have anyone, but now I have this chance. Thank you." My family could fight over money, shame, legacy, all they wanted. They could tear each other apart at backyard gatherings or silent dinners in pristine living rooms. But they would never be able to touch what mattered, because what I left behind wasn't just anger. It was hope. Not for them, for everyone else. And that's when I realized, the real revenge wasn't the scandal. It wasn't the binders or the screenshots, or even the gasping horror as reputations fell apart. It was the quiet good that grew from the wreckage. They let me die poor, but they couldn't make me die small, and long after their names were forgotten or reduced to footnotes on legal documents and outdated Facebook photos, there would still be students going to college because of a grandmother's name. There would still be readers finding courage in a paperback on the shelf. There would still be strangers remembering the story of someone who refused to go quietly. That was the part they never understood. You don't win by breaking people. You win by building something they can't destroy. I didn't leave a family behind, I left a legacy. It's funny how people think a legacy is about fame or fortune or plaques on a wall. That's not it. not for me. My legacy was always meant to be a seed, something planted deep, in places no one would think to look, growing in silence until one day someone walks by and says, "Who planted that?" They may not remember my face. They may not know the whole sordid tale of my family's betrayal. That's fine. I don't need my name in lights. I need it in roots. David told me once, back before all of this, that I had a strange kind of power. Not loud power, he said. Not the kind that fills rooms or wins arguments. Yours is the kind that outlasts people. You sink into things. You stay. I didn't understand it at the time. Now I do. My family thought they were attending a funeral. They were really attending the planting of something much bigger. You can't bury someone who's already taken root in 1,000 other places. In the months that followed, the noise faded. The think pieces moved on to the next outrage, the next scandal, the next beautifully packaged tragedy. But the scholarship grew. The letters kept coming. My memoir found its way onto library shelves, thrift stores, backpacks with bent corners and dog-eared pages. And the people who once used my silence as their shield, they had to live with the truth every day. That was their inheritance. Not my money, not my possessions, not my forgiveness. Just the raw, unedited truth. And no matter how many times they refreshed their social feeds, or crafted careful statements for their dwindling circle of allies, the world knew. More importantly, they knew. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about the girl who used to sit behind an English class, writing quietly while everyone else gossiped. It's about the foster kid with shaky handwriting and a heart full of fight. It's about the single mom who never got thanked but who now sees her kid graduate because someone, somewhere decided not to go quietly. It's about all of them, and maybe, in some strange way, it's about you. Because if you're hearing this, if you're reading this, you're part of it now. You don't have to make a grand gesture. You don't have to fight a public battle. But you can tell the truth. You can plant something small, stubborn, and beautiful in the places no one expects. That's the lesson. That's the real inheritance. They let me die poor. Then they showed up for my money. But I gave them something better. A story they couldn't control. A truth they couldn't escape. And a future that didn't need them in it. They left me with nothing. And from nothing, I built everything. I share stories like this every week. Stories of people who broke free, built new lives, and rewrote their futures on their own terms. If you're ready for more, not just revenge, but redemption, subscribe now. Join this community, because out here, we don't just survive, we build empires. See you in the next one.